Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Marquette University Law School, the virtual Lubar Center. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. Today, we are talking with Abim Kolawole, who is Vice President of Customer Experience Integration and Promoting Journey at Northwestern Mutual. Prior to that, he was Vice President of Digital Innovation at the Milwaukee-based company. Abim Kolawole is an attorney. He is one of the people helping lead Northwestern Mutual's efforts to increase Black entrepreneurship. He also serves on the company's Sustained Action for Racial Equality Task Force, and we'll be talking about all of that and more today with Abim Kolawole. Welcome. Good to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to have me. Thank you so much, Mike.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about what Northwestern Mutual is doing. And in the last few years, the company has become much more involved in trying to help with startups to increase startup activity. But this is a very targeted piece of that we're talking about here. Take us back to what the company announced late last year. Walk us through specifically what Northwestern Mutual is doing to increase Black entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to share some of those highlights, Mike. Northwestern Mutual has always been committed about creating a very diverse and inclusive environment within the company itself and the community at large. And that commitment has manifested in a variety of ways over the last couple of years. But specifically last year, on the heels of the unfortunate incident with George Floyd, CEO John Schlifsky decided to put together a task force called the Sustained Action for Racial Equity Task Force, made up of approximately 60 different leaders from our field force within the home office. And the effort really was, how might we, within the company and within our community, make sure that we have a footprint to reflect the commitment that we have? We created 4 work streams to focus on moving this along. The first work stream was creating a culture of inclusion and respect within the company and within the communities. We also wanted to make sure that we focused heavily on talent. How do we make sure we have the right talent pipeline? The third work stream is a work stream that I'm co-leading actually with a colleague of mine, Stephanie Lyons, called the Business Innovation and Financial Security Work Stream. And the last work stream is called the Partnerships and Community Work Stream. That collectively makes up the task force. And the CEO is leading that himself, leading the 60 leaders. And the whole idea was to be very intentional in putting some things in place. And that led to a workstream effort that I'm involved, setting aside $20 million from the Northwestern Mutual Futures Ventures Fund to really target an area where we thought there was a tremendous amount of inequities. And that's how we created the $20 million set aside to be able to fund Black entrepreneurs. From the data points we have, we understand that less than 1% of venture capital funding annually goes to Black founders. And we wanted to make sure that we created the opportunity for that to be remedied.
Ben, why is that? What, clearly the company looks at this and says, okay, there's an issue here. Why do we think there is that kind of disparity in terms of venture capital funding for Black businesses?
This goes back a lot to systemic racism. There's so many systems that have been in place for years and years and years, and this is just one of those ways where it manifests in terms of access to capital, access to loans. I mean, there are a number of things that we can think back historically that have really impacted Black and African Americans, and this is just one of those really, really chronic problems. When I think about the networks, for instance, also, you don't have Black and African Americans who have the same exposure to the networks that white Americans may have. And that manifests in so many different ways, and access to capital is just one of those things that we're deciding to tackle. Obviously, this is just the beginning. There's so many other things that we are currently contemplating, but those are some of the reasons.
So let's talk about how this will work in practice. $20 million is a lot of money, can make a lot of difference for a variety of startup companies. How do you decide who gets the money? Is it a matter of where they come from, or is it simply the best ideas? And I ask that because some people would wonder, well, will Milwaukee companies get preference in this, or is it just wherever they are, whoever has the best ideas?
No, it's a great question, Mike. It's really national. It's a national focus. We understand, again, that this problem is beyond just the borders of Milwaukee. And as a company that has clients nationally, we have a field force nationally, and we know that this is a systemic problem. We have some criteria in terms of the types of businesses that we evaluate. We want businesses that have some strategic relationships or alignment with Northwestern Mutual's business, and there are 4 areas in particular. But to your question, this has to be a national focus. And to date, we've received over 700 applications for the accelerator program, which is a part of the entire ecosystem effort that way. And I know we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. Yeah. But it's a national problem, and we have to have a national focus.
The accelerator that you mentioned, so this is something you're doing in collaboration with Generator, which is a Milwaukee-based company that's now operating around the country, a number of offices around the country. How will the accelerator program work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things we thought about was how might we have more of an ecosystem approach, recognizing that, again, access to capital is one particular problem, but there are a number of solutions that we can bring to bear. The way the accelerator works is recognizing that even though people have access to capital, may have access to capital, how might we also put in place a program with Generator? It's an immersion program for 12 weeks that enables people to receive mentorship, business development ideas, basically help to pressure test their business ideas such that when they graduate from the accelerator, they are even more viable businesses to be able to have access and receive capital funding. So when I talked about the ecosystem play, we are admitting companies that are very nascent, getting involved in the 12-week immersion program, graduating from that program and having the ability to apply for funding out of the $20 million fund, but also having a broader support ecosystem, connecting them to mentors, connecting them to the broader platform network that Northwestern Mutual has through the Northwestern Mutual Futures Ventures Fund.
It's really hard to underestimate, or maybe I should say overestimate, the importance of networking in all of this, because that's how deals are done. That's how companies get financing. If you don't have that, it's really hard to break through, is it not?
Yes, it's tremendously difficult. And we've heard that in spades, which is why we know that access to capital is one aspect of the solution. And my colleague, Craig Shedlow, who administers the Northwestern Mutual Ventures funds, has heard in several different circles the need to make sure that we are offering additional services and capabilities to really, again, begin to rectify. It's going to take a while, but that unequal access to the kind of connections that, have really helped a lot of people to be successful over the years.
How much of a difference can a single initiative like this make realistically?
It is one out of a larger set of other initiatives, but every good thing starts with a step. And we feel that this is a great step in the right direction. There's so many other things, thought processes that we're going through in terms of where we see other needs. We know that a ton of other companies have started similar initiatives, even within the Wisconsin area, and we're thinking about how we may partner to make sure that we develop this thriving. The vision is that the Milwaukee area, Wisconsin, becomes a thriving area for innovation, entrepreneurship, venture capital, and that we're able to leverage that to attract and retain talent. So it is one initiative out of many that we've seen nationally, but we feel very confident about the sustained nature of this initiative, at least at Northwestern Mutual, that we believe will begin to bear fruit, that, down the road, like I said, creates a great community for us all.
You mentioned at the beginning of this, Abim, that some of these conversations began after the unfortunate death of George Floyd, and then the protests have followed all around the country. How much urgency did what happened in Minneapolis lend to these sorts of conversations?
It was rather unfortunate that he had to take that kind of event, unfortunately, because we've known about these challenges previously. And when I say we, Northwestern Mutual, we've tried to tackle it in different ways. But the urgency is there. It's palpable. And I say the urgency in the sense of, if we don't think about things in an out of pattern way, and I say out of pattern because there's a particular formula that we may have followed in the past to be able to tackle some of this inequities. But we have to begin to think out of pattern. And that basically means, it's, in the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. We have to think differently, and we have to be so much bolder, and it calls for more decisive leadership, which is why I really commend our CEO, John Schliffsky, for leading this effort himself, and for us to think outside of the box in terms of how we may address that. So it speaks to the urgency, it speaks to the burning platform we have. It's a long, long way, but we're very confident that we will be adding incremental and actually transformational progress down the road.
I was going to ask you a question that I'm sure you get from time to time, and we hear this asked often. After something like the George Floyd situation happens, companies, businesses undertake well-intentioned efforts
Yep.
to have serious internal conversations about how they do business, what they're doing right, what they don't get.
Yep.
But what do you say to people who say, well, yeah, another task force, we'll see? What do you say to folks who are skeptical of the value of a task force?
Yeah, frankly, that skepticism continues, and you're going to hear that in a variety of areas, right? Nationally, community-wide, and even within the company to a certain extent. And the truth is in the proof points. And I think, first of all, the CEO being committed to this and making this a priority is a first proof point. Second is the specific measures that we are looking to achieve. Having a strategy that the entire senior leadership team is behind, having the right amount of funding to support this initiative. These things are proof points that we are well intentioned. We're going to double down some of the things we've been doing in the past, but we're going to create new paths. So, I feel very confident that within the next year plus, we will begin to see those proof points that really manifest in themselves and changing the narrative, frankly.
Yeah, you wrote a piece back late last fall about now being the time for bold leadership by businesses to deal with the issue of racial equity. And I was struck by, I think you said that the business world is at a pivot point.
Correct.
Right now. What did you mean by that?
There are times when you take things for granted, when you just believe and assume, for instance, that the Black community or Black and African Americans and they have equal access to opportunities. It is time for us to be able to think about things differently. If we don't think about innovative ways to approach problems, if we don't change our mindsets and understand that generations after us are not going to be set up for success, then as a company and as a people, I think the disappointments we've had in the past and the skepticism will continue. So I believe that this is a pivot point for Northwestern Mutual. It's a pivot point for the companies, and it's a pivot point nationally to change the narrative and start thinking and talking about this in a much more intentional way. But again, we need to see those proof points, and people are watching. So we need actions to back those words.
Let's give people a sense of the reality that exists out there. We talk about the number of businesses led by African Americans, the number of African Americans who sit on board of directors.
Correct.
The numbers continue to be amazingly small, do they not?
Correct. They do, unfortunately. And I very much applaud I very much applaud a lot of the things that I've seen so far that are calling for more women on boards, that are calling for more Black and African Americans on board, that are calling for more African American CEOs. And it's inspiring for me because even as a senior executive leader at Northwestern Mutual, I know when I mentor people, people appreciate seeing people who look like them in positions of responsibility. So when I think about African American CEOs or people on boards, it gives me hope that, again, that next generation can look up and say, hey, I belong. I am able to lead companies. I'm able to serve on boards. And I'm eager for more progress. And I'm glad to see, for instance, some of the exchanges have basically said by a certain date, they want to make sure that every listed company has an African American on the board. Those are steps in the right direction.
I want to ask you about something else you wrote about in this piece. And you talked about our unconscious biases, and these are important discussions that companies are having these days, and probably long overdue in many respects. But I was struck by something you said in that piece, Abim, and it stayed with me. And I'm quoting now. You said, "Outside of home and work, I feel great vulnerability as an African American man." Uh, People look at you and say you've had success on many different levels.
Correct.
Why do you feel that way?
Well, there's a certain comfort, obviously, at home. And in the workplace, I've been there 18 years, and people know you. People understand your character. And I don't walk around feeling people see color right away or treat me in a certain way. But the moment I step out of the four walls of my home or my company, and these are true experiences I've had, you recognize that you're just as susceptible, just as vulnerable, and that's unfortunate, right? And I carry around a certain kind of I call it a defense mechanism, because I recognize that, wow, now I'm out of my comfort zone in the home where I'm known and in my company, and I'm just as vulnerable. I could very well be any one of those African American men who we've seen stopped by the police with unfortunate incidents. It's that level of vulnerability that's troubling and disturbing. And the intentional conversations I've had with my son has been actually very interesting, because as much as I do not want to jade him, I also want him to know that when he steps out of this house, he's just as vulnerable, just as susceptible. And I want to raise his awareness, but not necessarily saddle him with the burdens of always thinking he's a black man walking around.
How old is your son?
He's 18.
Yeah, important time.
Important time, very important time.
Can I ask you to share the story that you wrote about in November? This is a pre-COVID experience you had going out with some friends at a Milwaukee steakhouse downtown. Can you share that with us? I think that points to what we're talking about, how people perceive others without knowing anything about them.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to share that. So, as you mentioned, a couple of friends of mine had gone out and we had a very nice meal. And of course, at the culmination of the meal, we all went to pick up our cars. And I was, walking towards the door. It was late, about 8, 9 p.m. that evening. I had this sense, because I was the only person there, and the valet had gone to pick up someone else's car. And again, I talked about being vulnerable once you step out of the workplace. There was this eerie sense that as I stood there, somebody was going to hand me the keys to their car to go park the car. And I consciously made sure I moved as far away from the valet. Again, not that there's anything wrong with, being a valet. I respect and humbled by what they do. But I was very intentional about making sure I was not mistaken for the valet, because that often happens. And unfortunately, lo and behold, after taking a couple of steps to the left, somebody stepped out of his car with his wife to come have dinner and walked right to me to hand me his keys, just as my car was pulling up. And I said, "I'm not the valet. That's my car." To me, the lesson was not that people do not make mistakes. People certainly make mistakes. It really was the thought process that I had to go through as I stood outside waiting for the valet to bring my car and thinking, oh boy, if you don't step aside, somebody's going to hand you their keys. And it's that thought process. When I talked about the vulnerabilities, when I talked about the unconscious bias, people I just wired to think about you in a certain way. And that was unfortunate. So of course I sent an email to my friends the next day saying, hey, you would not believe this. I try to avoid it, but it happened nonetheless.
What did your friends think? I'm just curious.
Not too surprised, to be honest. They might say, "Oh boy, I can't believe that happened," but not too surprised, because we're still in that age, in that time, where these things still happen. Some people don't think it happens, but it does happen, and it impacts how you conduct yourself on a day-to-day basis, and it certainly impacts me for sure.
You mentioned this was a pre-pandemic dinner, and so we are still in the pandemic. And
correct.
Your most recent role at the company before the new role was as the vice president of digital innovation. Yep. And so we're going through this time where there's a lot of pain and hardship for so many people, but there's also a lot of innovation occurring.
There is.
Do you think what's happened over the last year will change companies forever? And if so, will it be for the better or for the worse?
I think it will. I think it has to. I think it must actually, because this was a significant wake-up call, not just for companies, but for individuals. In terms of the level of preparedness, as a leader, one of the things we must do is to always look around the corners and anticipate the change in dynamics. We have to become rapidly adaptable to the changing environments. And for businesses, a lot of businesses, obviously, we're caught flat-footed, unfortunately. But I do think that it will teach us a number of lessons, a number of fronts. From a leadership standpoint, I'm hoping it would sharpen the strategic acumen of always looking around and picking up on weak signals and being as prepared as possible. As leaders in the company, how we lead our teams also is very important to make us all recognize that to keep a business viable for our customers and consumers, we really have to make sure that we're conducting the business and thinking about what eventualities may occur. So it really was a wake-up call in a lot of ways. I'm hoping for the better, that we're all better prepared. No one wants another pandemic for sure. We're certainly not over this pandemic. But from my own thought processes, I have a strategic approach that I share with others.
Yeah. I want to spend a little time on your career because you came to Northwestern Mutual. You're an attorney,
Yep.
and you came there to do legal work for the company, and now have moved into a variety of different roles at Northwestern Mutual. But I want to go back to your days where you were practicing law in New York City, your days when you worked for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Tell us a little bit about those early years for you. What was it that called to you about the law? What was it that you enjoyed most in those experiences?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. Boy, my legal career has been great in so many ways. Great in the sense of all the learnings, particularly you referenced my job at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. That was perhaps one of my most incredible opportunities. And I say that because I found myself at an agency that was charged with protecting the integrity of the U.S. securities markets, a marketplace that other nations look at and respect the integrity in the marketplace. And I was called upon as a young lawyer to be one of those protectors. I did a fair amount of insider trading cases. I did some market manipulation cases, things we see play out. And it was a great learning opportunity for me. If I were to take that experience and fast forward that and correlate that to where I am today, there's some connection points. A is understanding what it takes for businesses to have integrity and to create confidence in their consumers. In the business that we're in today, Northwestern Mutual, it's all about trust, confidence, and relationship building so people feel assured and have peace of mind about their futures. So we're in that business today, but the SEC is also foundational in the sense that it was all about integrity and protecting the lives and livelihoods of people. So the unique skill sets I had as a lawyer was just in terms of the deep thought process, bringing your legal skills to bear in an honorable way, has been just very impactful for me and carries through till today, frankly.
So should we be concerned after what you saw working for the Securities and Exchange Commission? Should we be concerned about where the money goes and how it's being used?
There's always need to be concerned about that, right? And make sure that, there's somebody who's watching for sure. But yeah, even the events a couple of weeks ago about, GameStop and I couldn't help but think about my colleagues who are at the SEC and investigations that may be going on and on, because those things shake the confidence in the marketplace. So, I rest assured compared to other economies that we have the right infrastructure and we have the right lawyers, we have the right thinkers, and it just gives me a lot of comfort and hope.
Let's talk for a little bit about your days working 9 years as an Army officer.
That's right.
in the JAG Corps, the Judge Advocate General's Corps in the U.S. Army Reserves.
That's correct.
Man, I got to ask you about that. How did that happen? And what was the takeaway there? What did you like about it? Because 9 years is 9 years.
9 years is a long time. I had great experiences there. The motivation was honestly to think about, again, from a legal standpoint, how do you as a lawyer serve the needs of soldiers? What are their unique needs? Changing the thought process. And so I had to find out myself. Obviously, there's an element of wanting to be able to serve your country, clearly that I fulfilled. But I learned a lot about legal services for soldiers. And I was very proud of instances when I was in Germany or Korea, helping soldiers who are getting ready to deploy. We getting their home affairs in order. That was a unique opportunity for me. There were also specific things when we think about the rule of law and rules of engagement, having the opportunity to advise battlefield commanders on those types of law war issues, for instance, where some of the things that I tackled. So it was a different lens into what do military lawyers do. And there's a wide array of things that military lawyers do that I became privy to and really enjoyed it. So it was an opportunity to take off my civilian legal hat and put on a military hat and serve the country, but serve soldiers with respect to legal things they may or may not be thinking about. So it was a very, very fulfilling 9 years of my career. I wish I could have served a little longer, but it's so many things to juggle, and I had to give some things up.
I'm sure it's a busy guy. I want to ask you finally, we'll bring it kind of full circle. I introduce you as the Vice President of Customer Experience Integration and Promoting Journey. And that's an interesting title. What all are the responsibilities that go with that new role for you now?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Mike. I'm very excited about the new role, the new opportunity. Speaks to continued trust and confidence in me to help deliver on the vision that Northwestern Mutual has. In a nutshell, my role is part of a number of leaders who are trying to transform the experience our clients have with us. Northwestern Mutual has been around for 163 plus years, but we need to be on the cutting edge of a new integrated client experience. And my responsibility with the promoting journey is how do we make sure that our clients have a phenomenal experience that is worth conveying to friends, family, such that they have the confidence to come and do business with us. So again, I'm part of the integrated client experience transformation that's been orchestrated within Northwestern Mutual. As it relates to integration, which is an additional role, that really is helping our consumers to recognize the power of combining investments and insurance to assure better financial security outcomes at the end of the day. So I have a unique role with respect to our business model, which again combines insurance products and investment solutions to ensure that we're adequately planning with families to make sure they have better outcomes in terms of guaranteed income in retirement and be able to leave a legacy for generations to come.
You've had a number of different responsibilities at the company. There are probably young folks who would, some might want to have the same job for a while. Some might want to see things from a different perspective. Have you enjoyed that part of the experience?
I have. Part of what I have done over the last 18 years, frankly, is mentoring people who may have wondered myself, how do I succeed at a company? What should I do? What roles should I be open to? And one of the things I've always said is you have to be open to personal disruption. And it often, makes people wonder, what do you mean? And I say, you have to disrupt yourself before you are disrupted, which means create the opportunity, the openness to experience a variety of jobs because they teach you skills and you never know what skill you have today that may be obsolete. And so being open to personal disruption is sort of the mantra. And, it's enabled me to be uncomfortable in a lot of instances, but frankly, it's also exposed me to a tremendous amount of learnings. So
Well,
I've enjoyed it.
good luck to you. Best of luck to you in the new role. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. We wish you well and success in terms of creating more Black entrepreneurs in this country.
Absolutely.
Abim Kolawole from Northwestern Mutual, thanks very much for being with us. And thanks to everybody who tuned in today for On the Issues. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. Have a great day.
You too.